Okay.
So, and we are probably live. Welcome. I hope we are live. It's always a bit dangerous with these live streams, but we are looking pretty lively. And my name is Kim Diaz Holm, also called Den Unge Herr Holm, and I'm an artist making art for free use. And what I have the pleasure today to have with me Dr. Clare Mulley, a real proper person who knows stuff.
Yeah, that's quite a way to introduce me, a real proper person who knows stuff. So I think I spend a lot of my life not sure that I am. So that's very flattering indeed.
To me, you
Um,
are a real proper person who knows stuff. That's
there
all
we
I
are.
can say.
Amazing. Well, I should I introduce myself briefly for the
Yeah,
viewers?
please do.
Very nice. So I am a tutor at the University of Oxford. I'm just quite fresh out of my doctorate in Old Norse literature and modern takes on Old Norse literature. We call that receptions. But the problem is when you say receptions, people keep thinking about small drinks and canapes. So I tend to say takes on Old Norse literature.
Yeah.
Um, so at the moment, writing on Völuspá, I have a performance project in the offing, which is all about performing Old Norse texts to try and find out more about the background in which some of them were written from oral culture or how they might have been transferred. That's what's going on at the moment.
And you are also a poet.
I am.
So
Yes, I'm a
so
poet. Yeah.
when you are doing a retranslation or uh, as we said, a gjendiktning, a repoeting in
A
a sense
repoeting.
of the
Yes, that's
Völuspá.
right. Yeah,
Uh,
it's mm,
and
good.
uh, um, that's a very interesting project because it's not just trying to translate something word for word, but and not to try to give an essence of what it was, but to sort of transmit it to a new audience in a way that's understandable. Is that
That's it.
that
In a way,
gives
yes.
that gives
Yeah, it's
similar vibes, I guess?
it's a lot of people quite like the term reoralization, but that's not again that's not quite what's going on. Generally when you reoralize, you add a bit of your own version, but you're generally repeating something you've read or heard in another medium. So we'd use that term with relation to um, it happened a lot in Iceland back in the day. You'd have somebody maybe memorize parts of a sermon in church or a folk story someone had read from a book, and then they'd go off and tell it to someone else. But in my case, it's a sort of mixture of creative translation and reoralization. I am trying to get out of the often trap of thinking of these works as static or as purely manuscripts. And I won't go into the whole theory, but I'm a fan of post structuralist theory on rhizomes. And rhizomes are grass stalks. The idea is to visualize works of art and literature as not just a linear line of progression, but as something that sprouts sideways like a potato or a mushroom. And various takes on whatever people hear or reproduce are all part of that artwork. I mean, it's not entirely dissimilar to what you do, but I'm trying to get back into the zone. I translated it on the one hand to try and get academic audiences used to hearing it, what it might have been like as an oral artwork back in the medieval period if it was performed, which we suspect strongly that it was. but also to capture the process of what medieval scribes and poets did by not only reproducing stuff blindly, but reproducing it in a way that is suitable for your own time period. So I have a big battle going on in my head with W.H. Auden, the English poet, when I'm doing this. I really like Auden. His work is awesome, but he had an entirely archaic and assuming approach to the Eddic poems. He wrote a whole long introduction. In fact, no, his friend wrote a whole long introduction to them. And it contained a lot of superlative statements like, well, obviously, in the medieval period, there would have been no room for variation. This is how it would have been recited. And you're like, huh? Wait a minute. Were you there?
That's not how recitation generally works, except
No,
in
it's
some
not.
unique circumstances.
Exactly. And, even in very idiomatic cultures or cultures with a very strong tradition, the whole point of being an artist is you get to riff on these things a little bit and add your own flavor. And as a performance poet, I knew this. So I thought, okay, Auden, let's challenge this. And I decided to rewrite Völuspá according to what I thought would really open the poem up for an English audience. And I have to confess, I stole the idea slightly. There was a Scottish poet did this about 20 years ago. Her name is Kathleen Jamie. She's the Scottish Makar. And she did her own kind of Scots adjacent version, which was really wonderful to hear. But I decided to try and do it for an English audience, and one that took advantage of my northern dialect. I come from West Yorkshire, which still has a lot of Norse roots in the dialect. And while I don't do it in an accent or with very heavy dialect, there are certain words that I've played with which I think capture some essence of the living language as it evolved, if that makes sense.
I will have to cut you off because we can talk all day about these things.
Oh, we can, yes.
Yeah, and actually we met a few months ago at the Midgardsblot and talked as long as we could about these things.
Yes, we did.
But what I wanted to do here on the stream is, because I have this image in my head of the creation of the dwarves from the Völuspá, as I call it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I wanted to see if we could collaborate in a sense on getting that image out. So what I thought we'd do is you start by reading or performing, however you want, your version of the Völuspá text as it is now, until we get to that little absurd list of dwarves, which has no reason almost to be there, and then we can start discussing what's happening on the page and what may have happened with that list and all of the other fun stuff surrounding Völuspá and trying to make these dead texts come alive for a living audience. Sounds good?
That's fantastic. Sounds great to me. So I'm going to read dramatically because, frankly, I'm tired and I'm rather worried about having a memory lapse today. So I'll just go from the top then.
And I'll begin drawing as soon as you start reading. You have my drawings on screen, I guess?
I actually turned off the live. Tell you what, I'm going to ask you to give me 10 seconds because, and this was a problem for my headphones, YouTube Live came up, but you were your voice was echoing because you were a couple of seconds behind on YouTube.
Yep.
So I'm going to get up YouTube and mute it. I'm going to get on YouTube and mute it, okay? Because this is too good not to watch.
Then we begin, and while you do that, I will just say there's a comment by Jeremiah Tan, says, by perform, do you mean like public reading oration, a lecture, or some other mode of delivery? I think you mean all of the above, and you will do one of the above right now.
I will do one of the above. Yes, what I mean is I will read my translation so far as it stands, but I won't do it from memory just because actually this is kind of special. I would like to give you the best possible chance of getting a good drawing.
Okay.
I think this is appropriate. So just in case, I imagine most people on this channel will know what Völuspá or how you pronounce it is. But if you're not sure, this is the time to go to friendly Wikipedia page and have a look while I start reading.
Yeah, we can inform you after. Just listen to the text first, and then
go look.
go to Wikipedia. Okay.
You can go in. We can go in blind. Okay.
Yeah,
so
let's start.
it begins with the Old Norse words. Hljóðsbið ag allar helgar kindir. Give me a hearing then, you holy people, kin of Heimdall the watchman, the grand curator extraordinaire, dictator of caste, partitioner of earth's halls. Odin, chief of battle slain, bids me recount the stories of the ancients and of man, that only I can tell. You down there who are dying don't remember. Those up there yearn only to forget, for now at least. But there's no helping what's to come. Again you ask for it. Again I'll say it. Do you know it yet? I remember Jötnar, the firstborn early in time. I remember 9 giantesses who raised me, their breasts mountainsides, canyons between their thighs. 9 worlds I have seen below the ground. I have seen the ash tree by which all is measured, spread its branches beneath the earth. I remember back when Ymir, first father, made his dwelling. There was neither sand nor sea, nor quenching waves. Earth was nowhere to be seen, nor sky above, not even grass. One great void. The gap yawned slyly to itself. No gift is life, born of destruction from the first. Ice to the north, to the south fire. Muspelheimer flared to melt the ice, Niflheimer swelled to quench the fire. From their struggles, steam rose, spray hissed, space warmed with dew fogs, salt formed. And Ymir, first father, more vast than words can reckon, roamed the void. Children swarmed from him, the first gods, Ymir, first father, their first prey. They ripped him open, ravaged him like wolves, with their hands scraped his tattered flesh into a mound, shaped Midgard, the world's surface. Bone to mountain, blood to billows, teeth to boulders, skull to sky, brains cumulus, hair to soft mosses. Newborn, the world nestled in the shadow of the ash. A pale sun shone, new minted from the south in those stone halls. The soil bristled, green with leeks. Shall I go on? From the south, sun, mate of the moon, flicked her right hand along the sky's rim. She did not know her place or path. The stars did not know where to put themselves. The moon did not know his own pull. Then the powers that be, the self-hewn gods, went to their thrones of fate, thought long and hard, then started naming names. Night and her children came first, then morning and midday, afternoon and evening. They began to count, binding time in an arithmetic of years. The high gods met on a higher plane, raised themselves with altars, temples, forged forges where they smithed precious things, shaped tongs, made tools for their own ends. They were content in those days, when everything was in order. They played checkers in the meadow. They did not want for gold. Until 3 fatal women, troll queens, came striding out of Jotunheimr, leaving the land of giants for new pastures. Then the powers that be, the self-hewn gods, sat in their thrones of fate, thought long and hard how to handle this. Who would create new craft to meet them, new life from first father, the old one's limbs? The soil seethed. Dwarfs rose to the surface, the maggots from Ymir's dead flesh.
Beautiful.
And then I will pause before the names of the dwarves start, because
Yeah.
that's a whole other ball game.
Yeah. Okay, so first let's sort of, I think, let's go through what happened in this little story so far, because one of the problems of poetry is that you get so stuck on hearing the beautiful words that you don't always connect the dots to the story.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing that the audience for this would have known at least bits of the story.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
So this starts with someone, Odin, coming to a Ceres of some sort.
It's an interesting paradox here, because yes, strictly speaking, in Seidr, yes, you would have Odin coming to a Ceres, certainly in human terms. But this is at the beginning of a poetry collection where you have him going to meet other Ceres figures. So it's never entirely sure whether there is one. Odin is clearly in some ways the official master, but there is also an idea that she has a certain amount of power herself. And I've often read her voice as being, on the one hand, she's in collusion with Odin. She knows what he's going to give her, but she's also, I think, a little sharp with him. That's just my personal feeling. There's a rhetorical sharpness to what she says. She keeps saying, "Vittu there would you know more and what?" It's almost like she's kind of rebuking him and saying, "Well, it's obvious, old man. Do you want me? Do you really want me to go through this again?" Some might say it's just a rhetorical device, but I don't know. When you perform it, you imbue it with your own emotional weight, I guess.
But
So he comes to her. Yeah.
I think that if, at least my general impression is, in these different episodes in different poetry where Odin goes to Ceres and wakes Ceres from the dead, and he isn't quite in charge of them.
No,
He
he's
is
not.
asking them for a favor in a sense, and they
Yes, he
are
is.
in charge.
They are in charge in a way because he's asking for a favor. And here at the beginning of the poem, she immediately says, "I'm doing this because Odin bids me." And the grammar of that phrase, I won't go into it too much because it's kind of boring, but it almost implies that she's kind of half addressing him, that he is somewhere. So it's a heck of an arena that even on a page is opening up here. We've got the world where whoever is meant to be in the room with her or in the space is present and listening. But there's also the implied other plane of the gods listening and Odin listening. And he has clearly asked her to do this. And so I guess the impression is that she is the intermediary here. She's not doing him so much a favor. But I don't think the old tone from the other poems quite escapes, because this audience would have known some of those other stories, I imagine. And so there's always there's a wobbling power dynamic between Odin's asking me to do this, so I have to do what he says, and I'm also doing him a favor.
Yeah. And since we haven't properly actually introduced the poems before we go on with the plot point so far, the name of the poem is Völuspá, or the prophecy, the spådom, the spå of the Volva, the seeress,
the Volva, the seeress. Whose name evokes a lot of laughter if you try to say it in English.
Volva, yes. Voluspå.
Which
for the vulva. That's
a spa for the vulva. I mean, all vulvas need a spa. Let's face it.
Yeah.
But
now we have to stop talking about this before the stream gets taken down by the ninjas.
The secret
YouTube.
Police.
Yes.
Yes, that's okay. We need to stop there. But yeah. So in Icelandic, Völuspá, and she would be a practitioner of Seder, the magic of prophecy, foresight, and you could call her spákona, I imagine, as well. But that also ironically refers to almost a children's toy. There's an Icelandic game where you take the bone of a sheep and you say vala vala spákona, and you offer to give the bone a reward if it gives you a nice prophecy, or put it in the potty under the bed if it gives you a really awful prophecy. So it's kind of like a magical 7-ball for, old-timey Icelandic kids.
But this, the Völuspá is, and excuse me for every every pronunciation I will do.
That's fine.
The Norse things will be in Norwegian, because that's the only way I can get my head around switching languages back and forth.
You say whatever you want. This is a proper interface, so say what it is to you. That's fine.
Yeah, and the Völuspá is one of the poems that are collected in what we call the Prose Edda. Is that right?
The Poetic Edda. The Prose Edda. That's okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. It's as it turns.
Yeah.
It appears in both, to be fair. So you're kind of right. The Poetic Edda is the version we have. It's in a manuscript called the Codex Regius, and it lives in Iceland at the moment. Denmark kindly gave it back after many years of conquest, and it is a full poem of about 60 stanzas. I would look at the number right now, but I don't really want to go riffling through the book. And Snorri wrote about it also in his Prose Edda, in Snorri Edda. And the text for Snorri actually quotes the same words as the manuscript for the Codex Regius, pretty verbatim a lot, but it's kind of fragmented and chopped up to act as a backup on all the points he's making about creation and Gylfaginning. So he has this whole creative spiel at the beginning of his Prose Edda about how the world's made, and he goes and answers questions from these three figures. And quite often he will say, as it says in Völuspá, blah, 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 blah.
So
which
basically,
isn't,
what we know about Norse mythology comes from a bunch of different sources that were collected or written down.
That's right.
In the post-Viking, early medieval Icelandic.
That's right. Yeah, and a lot of people get disappointed by that one, I have to say.
And these come to us generally in two different shapes. The two different the popular two sources are the Poetic Edda and the Prose Edda. And the Poetic Edda is
Yeah.
a collection of poems that were orally transmitted or otherwise transmitted, and
Yes.
some of which it was quite common to say that they were probably made up in the post-Viking Age. And then recently it's become more common to say that no, they are probably coming from sometime in the Viking Age, back
I think
from the 10th and
that's
11th.
the thing is that's still being argued over. I mean, this is scholarship all over. We're never going to, I think, unless we find some very new data, we're never going to know exactly. My impression as a fence sitter is generally it's a bit of some and some of the other. I don't think all of it was necessarily made up post-Viking Age. I think it was possibly heavily adapted in many cases, and that's normal as well.
Yeah.
But the essence of the material has, when you see some of the intertextual similarities between versions, you realize, okay, this was fairly grooved into memory, or at least there must have been some other textual version which was very well known and which was copied into these manuscripts in some way. And it was widely known enough that it has reached us in a similar vein. But also, this would have been a part of intellectual culture. Manuscript production in Iceland, a little less rarefied than, say, on the continent, because there's this huge literature of the middleman and a huge amount of books to quite a small amount of people. It's a fairly unique writing culture. But yes, essentially, what we know about the Old Norse mythology and its stories comes from the Poetic Edda. I can give you a recommendation for a good version in translation if you're interested in English. This is Caroline Larrington's version. So she's translated it for, this is an academic translation. It's not like mine. Mine takes some liberties, and I'll talk about those in a minute. And Snorri Edda is generally fairly available, I think. But Snorri's,
just to interrupt you there, because the poems in the Poetic Edda are the ones we thought are somehow transmitted at least a little bit back before they were written down.
Yes, and I think that's true of possibly most of it, if I'm really honest.
Yes, I would, as a non-academic, I agree, but that's just me.
No, that's just you. But yeah.
But the Snorri is a was Snorri Sturluson, who was a Icelandic chieftain.
He was an everyman, and bit of everything. Yeah,
bit of everything.
Yeah, he was a.
And the Prose Edda is a work that is composed by him.
That's right.
And it is also citing some of these earlier texts, and also citing texts that we have no other source from. And these two sources put together are our main source for most of the Viking mythology. Okay?
That's for quite a lot of it, yes. And what's really interesting about Snorri is his manuscript, his first manuscript of Snorri Edda, the one that we have in existence, that's the earliest at least, is older than the Codex Regius manuscript. So, you know, he's all these quotes that come verbatim, we are now reading in a later manuscript for the Poetic Edda. So there's a sign that there was a great deal of similarity between the two, and that he must have also got very similar sources and poems from elsewhere before the Codex Regius was even written down, which very much cements the idea that they were very much in memory culture, which, again, not surprising. Icelandic memory culture, Nordic memory culture is a very physical thing. And people set great intellectual store by being able to craft knowledge, remember great big lumps of it. They thought of it almost in lumps. And a lot of the metaphors around gaining knowledge are to do with honey or wood carving. So you're dealing,
One of the interesting things about how these poems were written is that some of them had a not too technical structure, but some of them had a very precise structure, which meant that you would have to be very precise if you were to change anything with them, and which also means that they could survive into an age where they had started to lose their meaning.
Yes, that's right.
They had their sounds and their rhythms and their structure, but people weren't quite aware of what they meant anymore. And that's what Snorri was setting out, at least explicitly, setting out to write a poetry manual so that you could... Am I seeing a smile of disagreeing?
I mean, not disagreeing. I have opinions about Snorri. I like him a lot, but he was a crafty old thing. I think
Oh, yeah.
Explicitly, yes, this was an attempt to concretize old Icelandic poetic culture and mythology in the face of progress. I think he also had a very big eye on his own output and his own public status as well. Yeah. So it would have added a great shininess to him to be able to say, "Oh, here is the culture according to me," and yeah, he always had his eye on the main chance, did Snorri.
And before we jump back to actually the story so far, I just want to add that we, in non-academic discussions, and certainly in some academic discussions, we get this idea of the Christianization of the Norse mythology, that it was presented for a Christian audience, which it absolutely was.
Yes, it was. Yes.
But in that time, there was a sort of a acceptance that the countries and the kings and the heroes had a great pre-Christian legacy as well, just as you found in the stories of the Old Testament before Christ, and you found in the stories of the Greeks and the Romans. And one of the things that's interesting that Snorri was definitely trying to do is to write stories about the great ancestors of
that's it. That's exactly what he was doing. He even connects them to Troy.
Yeah.
There's a whole opening section where he goes, "Oh, once upon a time, these people existed in Troy." In fact, I can even read part of a translation for you if you like. So this is...
Yeah, okay, do that.
It's just one sentence or two, just to give you an idea, because this is hilarious. So it's the prologue to Snorri Edda is, "Almighty God created heaven and earth and all things in them." So we go through biblical history first, because we cannot leave out the Jeebus man. We can't. So we have the world divided into 3 regions. Near the middle of the world was constructed that building and dwelling which has been the most splendid ever, which was called Troy, and we called the land there Turkey. And then we have the name of one king there was Munon or Mennon. He was married to the daughter of the high king Priam. She was called Throan. They had a son. He was called Thror. We call him Thor. And then Sif comes along. Basically, they introduce a noble race of people, all of whom are clearly designed to segue into the Aesir. And what happens is, after the Trojan War, or actually not even after the Trojan War, just from Troy, this family, if you like, or clan of people set out from Turkey. They travel north and they establish a stronghold into the country, in the country that's now called Saxony. And then they rule there. And it actually, the whole book essentially begins talking about them as human rulers. But then we jump into Gylfaginning, and it's a total changeover. Suddenly they have magic. Suddenly we have the whole other alternative story of the world's creation. So it's kind of a shoeboxing job, for want of a better expression.
And
Snorri is shoving it all into the same bag, is what he's doing.
And just before I try to steer us back to what we are supposed to be talking about.
Yes, sorry, that's going to happen a lot. I do beg your pardon.
Is that one of the things that I try to hammer down when I talk about these things is that when we're looking at how these stories may have potentially been changed when they were written down to suit their audience, we have to remember who their audience was and what was the point of them. And we see, for instance, like you read, that when Snorri wanted to connect these stories to Christianity, he wasn't subtle about it. He was straight up. This is how it's connected to Moses and Christ and Adam and to Agamemnon and Troy and all of that. It's explicit. It's not subtle at all. It's not trying to change something slightly. But
it's like a kid saying "once upon a time" because he knows it's expected of him, and then he goes, "Okay, on to the good bit now."
Yes, but the danger there is that we aren't quite sure about what was important for him to change, but we can get a little hint when we compare him to the Danish Saxo Grammaticus, who wrote like 50 years before. And in Saxo Grammaticus, all the cool heroes and therefore the cool gods just happen to be related to the Danish royal family, which through the church commissioned this work. And in Snorri, all the cool heroes and gods just happen to be related to the Norwegian kings who he was politically
to whom Snorri was. Yes, Snorri was working very hard there.
We sort of we want to see this like almost a conspiracy. Oh, he must have Christianized the tales, but rather he probably royal familyfied them.
He absolutely did. And when you consider the commercialization of books, back in the day, imagine how expensive they were to produce. You go on any project like that, you have to justify it up to the eyeballs, the time it takes. And particularly when you have people who could be writing other books, they could be writing holy books. So you can imagine that to some extent it is a PR stunt. He really wants to get this out there for his own reasons, and clearly for several reasons, not least the elevated status it will afford him. But to do that, he has to pitch it. And it is that, I think it is that vulgar, quite honestly.
Yeah. And in at least medieval Norway, the royal family had to be related to Olav Tryggvason and to Harald Hårfagre, the two eternal kings of Norway.
Yes, they absolutely had to.
And the eternal king, and also to Olav den Hellige, the saintly king. Yeah. And so you get people like the claimed ancestor of my family, King Magnus Lagabøte in the 14th century or so, who is of course related to all the right kings, but
of course
it happens to be through a concubine, and his father again is related to them, but through a concubine. And you go back, and everyone is related through a concubine.
Oh yes,
and
they got busy.
If you go through then Snorri's saga sources, they're all related back to Odin.
Oh yeah, everyone's related to Odin. Yeah. It's like he's like Charlemagne. He just gets everywhere.
But that is enough of this digression. Let's we got to the part in Völuspá where
I'm sorry.
Odin
This is what happens
asks
when
Volva.
I think we're either a very good pairing or very bad because this keeps happening. I don't know.
Yeah, I think I hope people like it. So comment if
I
you
hope
like
they
it.
do.
Yes.
Comment if you like this rambling. But yeah,
So
so Snorri, last word on the subject. If you're going to read Snorri, view him first and foremost as a politician and not as a literary bod, because he was very accomplished and a kind of Renaissance man before the Renaissance, but he had his audience to essentially please, and he was very good at pleasing in that sense. Okay, back to the story. God damn it.
So,
Sorry. Where were we?
We were almost at the first line of the story.
Almost.
Odin
Oh, gee.
asks the seers to reveal to him how all
The
that has been
story,
and all that will be.
all that has been and all that will, well,
And
yes,
that
essentially
that
everything.
is the story of Völuspá. And
It's the story of everything.
yeah,
Absolutely everything in a condensed version.
it's sort
So
of
yeah,
a highlight reels of the creation and destruction of the world.
and it is quite, it is in Fornøðuslag, which is a type of Old Norse meter, which allows for a little flexibility, but ultimately still quite tight. So the reason why a lot of people have trouble with the poem is that it's heavily elusive. It doesn't spell everything out, which is partly why my translation is a bit wordier, because for an English audience, I wanted them to feel in the moment and able to understand what was happening. So I took a bit of license with that, and added content. I even added excerpts occasionally from other texts where that content was implied, but it wasn't necessarily filled in for a more expert audience. Like Ymir, for instance, he doesn't appear in Völuspá at all. I think he's mentioned by name once when Ymir made his back in the past when Ymir lived, but that's it. I added the bit about him being ripped open by his many children.
But the general events that the series describes are the world starts with
Yes.
ice and fire and a void. Or?
So the way she starts, and I'm going to just refer to the translation here, is she remembers the giants, but she talks about essentially the void. No earth nor sky above, just a void. And it dwells on the fact that there's not even grass, which I quite like. So it's as if that is the common denominator that everybody kind of needs to feel like they're in creation. Fair enough. And then we go into talking about the sons of Bur, brought up the land surface. So this Bur is, let me see, the man who was licked out of salt by Oidhembla, the giant cosmic cow. I imagine, have you drawn her before? I think you might have done. Yes, you have.
I have in beautiful purple. I have.
In beautiful purple, she is fabulous. So then once his sons, she says they make the land surface or they bring up the land surface, and they omit the story of the dismemberment of Ymir, whether for artistic license or whether they thought the audience would know that story already and dispense with it. Hard to say, really. Maybe if we're talking about a later iteration, they thought it was a bit too bloody, but we will never fully know that answer. Whereas Snorri does talk about Ymir and his children and the dismemberment. But this poem just goes straight to the chaos, and then before the sons of Bur brought up the land service, those who shaped glorious Midgard, then the sun shone and the leeks grew on the ground, and then the sun and the moon came into their place. But it talks about the celestial bodies kind of just appear. They are already there. They're just not in any particular pattern. They're just doing their own thing. They're very happy. And then it's the gods who set them on course, is what happens. They make most of the poem is about the gods trying to instill order, tighter, until eventually and inevitably order bursts. It's kind of a never-ending doom loop of it's going to happen, it's going to happen. We'll try not to make it happen. We'll try not to. Oh, it happened.
It's
That's
I almost say it is divine doom scrolling.
It is divine doom scrolling, kind of. That's a very good way of putting it, I think. But the point is, there is a structure of control, event, response, and the biggest thing they do first is control time. And they name the celestial bodies, they make time start, or they bring an awareness of time which wasn't there before. And then they make their stronghold, they raise their buildings, they make themselves essentially a heavenly civilization where it's kind of a playground. They do what they want. It's a lot about forging precious objects and smithing, playing checkers. In the line, they did not want for gold, or they did not lack for gold. Then suddenly you get the entrance of the 3 women from Jotunheimer. Giant girls, ogresses, giant women. They're translated a variety of ways. But for whatever reason, and whatever these women represent, and there are lots of different ideas on this, suddenly the whole of creation goes, oh crap, we need to do something about this. And they go and have a debate, and suddenly there's dwarves. So apparently something about the dwarves is an answer to something that the giant women have brought into this creation.
And this is another of the strange things which doesn't necessarily have anything to do with Völuspá or any of that, but
it's clearly somebody is working on prior knowledge there. Yeah, I think so, because it's not explained.
But what I'm trying to grasp at is that this image of these 3 giantesses, Jotnir, coming and the gods going, what the... That's a powerful image.
It is. It is a very, very powerful image.
I've never seen it used in any sort of fiction or pop culture around. I haven't even
Which is a real shame. Which is a real shame, because it's just such a wonderful moment. And we know from Eddic mythology that giantesses are a striking bunch. Like, they might be, you know, your traditional haggish looking things, ogresses, but giantess could mean absolutely stunning. And it didn't also necessarily mean that they were bigger than the Aesir. It just, they were another equally powerful race who happened to either clash with or mate with them. There's a highly colonialist structure going on. So I don't know, there's been some suggestions that they represent, inevitably, because there is clearly some kind of underlying misogyny somewhere in the mix. Hey, it's the medieval period and hasn't all stopped, that they represent some kind of instinctive or less admirable animal qualities, such as greed or gold lust, or something that has upset the balance of these guys just sitting in the meadow and playing with their tools, you know.
Sitting in the meadow,
now suddenly they're in trouble.
Yeah. But
that's exactly what they're doing. Yes.
We have first have a comment that says the rambling is good for someone who rambles equally.
Nice.
Also, we have a question: are these 3 ogresses the Norns?
I doubt it. It's never stated, but the Nornir are mentioned later in the poem by name. And my feeling is, if they had been the Norns, they would have been named earlier. And the Nornir have a very specific job to do. Thus, they are not clearly... it's never explained what race they're from or what people they are. They kind of sit off on their own. Whereas it's very clear these are giantesses. I think the general negative backwash that happens when they come in means that they are at least controversial, at most considered evil. And the Nornir are far more neutral. They're very much set apart as a trio. And in fact, they're not even always a trio. Nornir can be in groups as much like Disir, sort of like battle spirits in some Icelandic tradition, or fate spirits. But these ones, these ones are kind of benign.
The Nornir are in some sense closer to the vulva, to being a
They
sort
are.
of a,
they really are, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they are very much, they see everything. And it's commonly thought by many that they are spinners. This actually is a borrowing, is my feeling, because people have read Greek mythology. And the fates in Greek mythology are spinners. There's a lot of, and even Wagner took on this image and had them weaving a rope of fate. But the reality is that their job, as it were, the earliest job we see them having is putting white mud on the roots of the tree Yggdrasil, keeping it watered and nourished.
But that being said, there are also a lot of association between female power and spinning in Norse culture
Valkyries,
overall.
Valkyries spin, yes.
Yeah. It's not out of the question, but
no,
we just have
it is not,
no...
It's not out of the question, it's just not specifically what they always do.
Yes,
the Nornir are not, I don't think they are ultimately meant to be associated with spinning. It's not like Thor and his hammer. Thor and his hammer are kind of inseparable. You might picture them doing it, but Valkyries or battle spirits are the ones who traditionally spin, as in... oh my goodness, this is always the embarrassing moment where the apparent expert forgets the name of the poem. The beautiful poem where you see these battle spirits weaving a tapestry and foretelling the future, but they're weaving out of dead men's guts and using heads as weights.
Oh, yeah. I just read about this, but I don't...
I will remember it and I will kick myself later.
Is it Sigdriva? No, it's not. The victory...
Wait a minute.
Driving. But that's not...
No, Sigurdrifamal is different.
Yes.
So, weaving... see, this is what happens all the time. It's really, really annoying when you're researching. Honestly, it's because you think you're meant to kind of know everything on the spot, but then you just have a lapse in memory, and it's and it crops up at the weirdest moments. Honestly, so it's in. Let me see. I'm trying to find Darudalio. That's what it is.
You will have to say that again.
Darudalio. We can put it up in the comments afterwards if you like.
Yeah.
But it's a spear song, and it occurs in Njál, and it's at the end of Njál's saga.
Okay, now I remember where I read about it recently. Yes.
Yeah, but that intersperses nicely with Celtic history in an actual historical battle. But there's a nice story added on where they're singing this song, and incidentally, Walter Scott went up to Scotland to research for a folk collection. He heard fishermen singing a version of the same song, the Radalio, which just shows you how these things... And they hadn't read it in a book. They just had it in their culture. And they were singing it in the boat, which I think is fabulous.
Just to add some confusion here, since we've established that the Norns didn't spin, I find it interesting that in later Norwegian fairy tales, there are often combinations of three troll sharing, the troll wives, who can
troll sharing,
be a lot smarter and more dangerous than the troll men often.
Oh, yes.
Who sometimes one of them spins, like in the Traveling Companion, where one of them gives the hero a yarn, a magical yarn, and in others they may all spin.
Yeah.
So there's something about spinning trolls,
There is something about spinning trolls and spinning women.
spinning women.
I think it's just, yeah, it's there's different shades, isn't there? But it creeps in, and it doesn't just creep in from the Greek. I think there's something I would like to dive into at a later date, and something I'm looking into researching. But handcrafts, women, and instinctive power often seem to go together. So there's not the didactic book kind of wisdom that we're talking about, which is often a very masculine culture thing. But there's often a big differentiation between, say, something like that and women instinctively. I get the non-academic term is women instinctively knowing stuff and doing stuff with their hands, and it's very much there's a whole body of work about the scariness and uncanniness and general kick-assedness of women's knowledge just on that basis.
And if we go back to Völuspá, now we've
back to
gotten
Völuspá. Now we've got to the dwarves.
We've almost we just need to stop at the thighs and the breasts of the ogresses, the giantess.
How we did that already.
Yeah, but
we
how
did that already.
Them? You said
now that one I'm afraid I used some poetic license for it. So I just saw them in the landscape, and there is, as far as I recall, a certain other Old Norse poem which describes giantesses' bodies in the landscape. Any nerds out there, please tell me what it is, because I can't remember. But this was one example of me taking some creative license to add an extra line of my own to try and draw a picture in the mind. So okay. the poem just goes, 9, I remember Jutna the first in time. I remember 9 giantesses who raised me. That's it.
Okay, so at this part of Völuspá, we get a list of dwarf names. And what I really find amusing is that these types of lists are not uncommon in this type of literature, not necessarily Norse, but in a more global context. You get all these lists of gods, and you get the lists of kings, and you get these types of just name-dropping powerful things.
That's it. Yes, and that is very Nordic. But this list, as you say, is very much part of, shall we say, other cultures, which is why a lot of people think that this dwarf list might be an interpolation, something that was added later.
But that still doesn't help, because it still doesn't tell us why are they listing these small maggot creatures, which whose names are later or in other stories used as powerful craftsmen and strange allies, or...
Well, that's it. And there's some dwarves which I am fairly sure only appear in this list, and you'll never hear from hide nor hair from them ever again. But there are some sparks of recognition. Nordri, Sudri, Oistri, Vestri, also the names of land spirits. You see, so you call the four corners, and I've heard people do this in modern day Ausatru as well.
Yep.
There are certain names which are only familiar because Tolkien nicked them.
Yep.
Which I find hilarious. I don't know what you've called that. Posthumous fame, maybe, or meta fame, that someone's added fame to them. But otherwise, there have been lots of theories about the importance of these dwarves. One theory I have heard, for what it's worth, and I don't know if I agree with this, is that they might have, and many of them might have represented festival days or certain events in the pagan calendar or in certain calendars to do with masks, games, occasions and certain seasons. I mean, I think that's an interesting idea, but we don't.
Absolutely.
The thing is, we don't know enough about it, so we can only throw a few guesses out there and try to align them with other, for example, Yuletide games and things, and the suggestions that might be there. There is one other theory which I really like about four of the certain dwarves. In an Old Norse / medieval Icelandic hall, or just a medieval Scandinavian hall, the hall pillars, the main ones supporting the structure, or certain little ones around the top, were called dvergar, dwarves, and they held up the ceiling. So in performance scholarship, it has been suggested that maybe, even if they weren't immediately linked, one way to bring the poem to life would be to point to these pillars when you're mentioning the dwarves. And so you kind of had a whole cosmos inside that hall. You had the water pot, if you wanted to indicate streams or pools or anything else. You had the high seat, which could represent Hlidskjalf, Odin's seat, or the Völva's chair when she's giving her prophecy, because it was important for her to be raised on a platform. And yeah, you could point to the roof for the heavens. I mean, you had a sort of mini cosmos in there that you could kind of use as props if you wanted to. It doesn't explain what the dwarves were, but I think the similarity in wording is interesting, definitely. Terry Gunnell has talked a lot about this in his folkloric works.
Interesting. And are the other dwarves who, shall we go through the list?
Let's go through them, shall we? Shall I read would you like me to read them in Old Norse, or will that take too long? I could just read my translation, if you like, or
read them in Old Norse.
I'll read them in Old Norse for you. Hang on. Yeah. I've got an okay list here. So we have first Modsognir and then Durin, and they come in their own little verse. So Modsognir is the most famous, and Durin, and then the rest of them come along. And the idea is that Durin helps to name them. So Nui, Nithi, Nodri, Sudri, Ostri, Vestri, Althjofur, Dvalin, Naur och Nain, Nifinger, Dain, Bifur, Bafur, Bumber, Nori, Aun och Aunar, Oin, Mjöðvitnir, Veger och Gandalfur, Vindalfur, Thorin, Thraur och Thraun, Thekker, Litter och Vitter, Nyr och Nyrader, nu hef jag dvärgar, Regin och Raudsvider, rätt omtalda, Fili, Kili, Fundin, Nali, Hepti, Vili, Hannas, Fyr, Billinger, Bruni, Bilder och Buri, Fraur, Honbori, Freyr och Loni, Oirvanga, Jari, Eikinsjaldi, Maledväger i Dvalins Lithi, Ljona Kingdom till Lofastelja, Therit Sotu, Frau, Salesteni, Oirvanga, Sjött till Jörvatle. Där var Draupnir och Dolgthrasir, Haur, Hagspori, Klevangar, Glowin, Dori, Ori, Duffer, Andvari, Skirfir, Viffir, Skafir, I. See if there are any more. I need to go to the next page. Alfur och Yngvi, Eikinskjaldi, Fjalla och Frosty, Finner och Ginnar. Yeah, that's the names of the dwarves in Old Norse.
You have some...
There you have it.
There you have it. That's the end. Bye-bye.
That's the end of... Goodbye, that's all, folks.
The astute listener would have heard some familiar names.
Yep.
For instance, Gandalf is there.
Yes, Gandalf. Indeed. Which means staff elf. Literally, staff elf.
And that's, if I'm not mistaken, that's one of two places you have the Gandalf name. The other is a human king somewhere in Hedmark in Norway.
You're probably right there. That's less and less in my ballpark, but I have heard it said twice. Absolutely. So popular name.
Yeah, popular name. And then you have Urvanger.
Urvanger, yes.
Yeah, who I think pops up in other mythological tales.
Most likely, yes.
And Fjalar pops up, I think. But
Yeah, Fjalar pops up towards the end. Fjalar and Frosty.
Frosty is a very good name.
The dwarf of cereals.
Yeah. It's almost Disney-like in some of these names.
It pretty much is Disney-like, yeah, I
some
think.
of them are a bit silly. And
they really are quite silly, yeah.
I would also imagine they were silly in the old Norse.
Yes, I think, I imagine performatively, if you're going to perform this list of names, there has to be some kind of, if you're going to give people entertainment or something to join in with, like every story has a part to it, whether it's performative, whether people want to join in or go, oh, I recognize that one. Or maybe it's just to make them laugh because it sounds silly, but all of these are a possibility, or combined possibilities, I think. It's like when you tell a kid that, I mean, I think Snow White Disney is the closest example in many ways we have. Happy, grumpy, sneezy, bashful, doc, happy, whatever. It goes like that. And kids will go, oh, I know them.
Yeah.
And they'll kind of laugh at the names as well.
And in similar fashion, parts, there's these clusters of names that have a poetic rhythm.
Yes, indeed, they do.
That you would, even though you didn't perform the whole list in one go, you would perform each of these clusters as...
Yes, you would.
Yeah.
And the poet is saying, oh, I've tallied them up now. A couple of times the poet stopped to say, oh, I've done them all now, but then add some more. So I wonder if there's a bit of me that wonders if you're meant to go, oh, wait, no, not finished yet. And it's kind of a bit farcical. It's meant to be funny. Or maybe the reciter would even quite traditionally catch their breath or very dramatically go, naughty bastards, and do that. And people would laugh at them, especially if they were a bit drunk.
Yes. Which they probably were.
Which they probably were, let's face it. Wouldn't you be? I would be. I think it's, the thing is, people tend to want one answer to this kind of question. I think the answer more likely is all of these and more. And context plays a big part, but there's entertainment value in this list for whatever reason. And it is meant to be poetically satisfying to say. But it is weird because it is the section of Völuspá which is mainly, I think, sound dependent. It doesn't add actually anything to the story narrative-wise to hear all these names. So it must have had weight in a different way.
And no matter how it had weight, whether it is original to the first versions written down or it is added later and given weight,
yeah,
it has weight which we don't know anything about, which is fascinating.
That's it. Which is fascinating.
Because in all of this story, in all of this part of Völuspá, epic things are happening. Every line is something being created or destroyed, or the giantess or the children of Bor and the big dwarves.
Yes.
And how it's put in there, it baffles me, and I like it very much.
I mean, there is every chance that, I mean, the thing is, when people think of book versus oral culture, there tends to be this nice even split in the brain of, oh, one day everyone started with the books. No, not at all. This may have been performed, but it might not always have been performed. Chances are somebody added it for fun. And then someone thought, oh, that's cool, I'll add it to my manuscript. Or even the other way around. It could be anything. And the great tragicomedy, in a way, or comedic tragedy of Völuspá is, you're right, everything is on such a grandiose scale, and there's such a lot of ripping and digging and bursting up and traveling forth that, you know, it is tempting to view this section almost sometimes as comic relief, because there is no list like it in the rest of the poem.
But
So it's hard to know.
That is one of the things that makes the Norse stories, both the poems and the sagas, be more easily digestible than a lot of other mythological literature, is that there is quite a lot of room for comedic relief. There is
a ton
action. There are jokes. There are fart jokes. There are there's all sorts of humor happening in between the epicness.
I think so, and it's like the tone that creeps up in Asbjörnsen so much, and indeed Asbjörnsen is like the little brother, where you'll have a very, very terrifying story about a witch, but there's still a funny moment because you see her scurrying out of a woman's house to escape the woman's husband. She's like, "Oh, I'll just hop over the churchyard wall," and that's funny. And because you kind of, you know, she's a bad person, but you also kind of want her to get away.
And if we look at, you know, this is over 500 years later, when, and I'm assuming you're talking about Asbjörnsen and Mo, the
yes, I
fairy
am,
tale writers.
Well, I'm not actually talking about the fairy tales. I'm talking about the Huldreventyr.
Ooh. I know too little about them. I know they exist, but
fair enough.
But it's a field of research I haven't gotten to quite yet, that I've been aware of. But if you look at how Asbjörnsen and Mo, and also the other fairy tale collectors and sagn collectors, when you listen to how they described how these stories were performed, there were quite often different versions of the stories depending on whether it was a daytime story told to the kids in the kitchen, or it was a nighttime story told to everyone who's drunk.
Oh, yes.
And you can quite easily imagine that this distinction between different types of audiences for the stories. There's one telling of the story which happens in the kitchen, and there's one telling of the story that happens when you're sitting weaving for hours and hours, and there's one that happens when in the evening, where everyone wants entertainment, and there's one that happens when it's a more formal setting.
And that's it. This is how I believe it most likely worked as a performer. Because once you've performed, you know that you can say the same poem in any room and it won't be the same poem because you're not interacting with the same people. So a poem like Völuspá, with all its many vaguenesses, you might as an academic see that as a frustration because, oh, how am I going to get my questions answered? What am I going to do with this void? A performer can actually step into that gap and try out different possibilities in front of live people. And it doesn't mean they know the answer, but it means them taking a more experimental and communicative route in trying to work out a likelihood. So that's why I went into performance archaeology. I should say, by the way, my type of performance archaeology is purely textual. There are people who are actual archaeologists and do this in a different way. What I mean by performance archaeology is the human import of the texts and how they might have been received and delivered. So yeah, I get Frosty, for example, that lovely dwarf named Frosty. Children might have seen him as a frosty star or the frost on the ground, and there might have been a crackling noise. I can well imagine someone, I mean, while the word is not the same, if this were an English poem or an English dwarf, I can well imagine adults having a name like imagining him as Frostbite on your bum or something. And then if you're having an adult performance, perhaps even people play the role of the dwarves, especially if they are connected with some kind of festival or japes. They might come running in and play very momentary pranks as part of the performance. Who knows?
I just
There
have to
might be
read
something.
one comment that I assume came when you were reading all the dwarf names, and that is
Yes.
Jeremiah, who says, "But wait, there's more."
There's more. Yes, that's exactly what's. I actually, one time, I was translating the passages with the dwarf names, and I think I did write, "But wait, there's more." So it's very close to home, honestly. So,
Okay.
and if you wanted to be really funny about it, you could go, "Yes, I think I finished now." "Oh wait, no, I haven't." Or, "But hang on, there's more." And you could do a whole. You know Tom Lehrer? I think Tom Lehrer would have had an absolute ball with the dwarves, like with the Elements song.
This is out of my wheelhouse. I don't know who that is.
Oh, you're going to enjoy him. Tom
I
Lehrer
think.
is an American singer-songwriter. He wrote the Elements song and songs like "Poisoning Pigeons in the Park," and he
Ooh.
accompanied himself on the piano. He was a satirist, and he's very readily available on YouTube. I'm sure some of the listeners may have heard of him too.
It's ringing some bells. Ringing some bells. But I'm
Yep,
almost
there we are.
finished with my
You're almost finished. My goodness.
with my interpretation, which isn't as funny as as the names are, but it's more my image of these maggots forming into these little mystical creatures.
That
Through
is
the
wonderfully
flesh
metal. Wow.
of something. And so I tried to hide small creatures around there, and I also wanted, because I recently read that there was, I think it was on the Isle of Man, in a woman's grave, a trilobite necklace was found. So
That's
someone
marvelous.
had found a trilobite and made a necklace of it. And I wanted to do these trilobite shapes, these maggot-like things that you can find inside stones.
Yeah.
And I wanted
Who's to say these are not dwarves?
Yes.
Yeah.
Probably, in my estimated opinion, it probably were.
I think people have for a long time looked at fossils and thought, even when we kind of know what they are, they spawn stories of mythical beasts that I think a lot of medieval animals certainly would have come about because someone found an interesting skeleton somewhere. And the unicorn was clearly a narwhal. So I think all power to it, really. Yeah, why not? Why not trilobites?
Yeah, why not trilobites? So, and I'm not saying all trilobites are dwarfs or all dwarfs are trilobites. I'm just saying that there is somewhere a dwarf trilobite spectrum that overlaps in some ways in my imagination.
I mean, I love it. It's very metal, and also it manages to be kind of a version of mythological paleontology, and I'm all about rocks. I went beachcombing recently and found some shiny things, and I always take them home with me and put them on my shelf behind me there.
And
so yeah.
But I want to do one final thing here.
What's that?
And that is, first I'm going to sign it because I'm daring that way, but I do have this symbol that I sometimes use, which is an enso, which I appropriated from Zen Buddhism and made into my own sort of satanic symbol, which means it's just a circle that you have to draw in one go, and in Zen Buddhism, it has different significance whether it's open or closed to the circle. But in my own appropriation of it, it can be open or it can be closed as long as it feels good. And if it feels good, it symbolizes nothingness and eternity, and it could symbolize God or devil, or it could symbolize, it's a one
it's
circle,
very
so it could be
cosmologically appropriate.
Odin or whatever. But the thing is, if I fail, then the rules are that I have to tear up the drawing.
Oh God. Okay. That's pressurized.
And I didn't make the rules. I only made the rules, so I have to follow them.
Got it.
So
yep.
Concentration and perhaps a drum roll. I think it works.
Oh, you think the face is unsure?
It's not up to me. It's up to the gods that don't exist. As a
it's up to the
God-fearing
trilobites.
Yeah, as a God-fearing atheist, it's up to the powers that doesn't be.
The powers that doesn't be, not the self-hewn gods. I think it works. I really do think it works.
I think it has the same sort of wunk to it as the best trilobite worm things here, so it sort of connects it, and it's got the eye, so it's sort of like Odin looking down.
It is kind of like Odin looking down, or even one of the newborn celestial body is just hanging out and going, oh, what's going on here then? But you can see the ribs. I love the ribs. Very into that. But did you want to, as a closing thing, hear my translation of the names of the dwarfs? Because I kind of mucked about with them, if I'm honest.
Tom Lear, now that I see his name, I know his name.
Now you do.
I have a few comments. Hi to Mona and hi to all of you. And let's just read if there are some.
Hello, Mona.
Your favorite rock?
My favorite rock. You want to see my favorite? I do, actually, yes.
And you have it close by?
I have it right behind me. Just a second. Oh, this is my little collection. Where are you? This is my favorite rock at the moment. So I'm a bit of a magpie. I don't know if you can see it. Oh, webcam.
Ooh.
This is a flint.
Nice.
So it's a big chunk of, I found it on a beach in Whitby, incidentally, where Dracula apparently landed. I went up there for my birthday this year, and I went beachcombing, and I found it looks kind of like a tooth, I think. But what's really nice about it is you rub your thumb over it, and it's super smooth. I use it when I need to calm down quite a lot.
Fantastic. Okay.
Rocks are very, very calming.
So I think we will hear your version of the dwarf names, and then we will say goodbye, if that's okay with you.
That's okay with me. I have somewhat tricked listeners. When I perform this, I don't do the whole list. What I say is that there are many others I will not mention, but I did a little translation of some of the first ones. So I've got Mudsognir, most famous, Durin the Decider, New Moon, Dark Moon, North and South, East and West, Thief Master Dvalin, Bifa Buffa Bomber and Nori, An and Anor, Great Grandfather, Mead Wolf, Liquor and Staff Elf, Wind Elf and Thrain, Hroin and Thorin, Thror, Colour and Wise, Corpse and New Counsel, Regin, Right Advice, and Clever Counsel. And that's the beginning of my list.
Just before we say goodbye, they do remind me also of the Yule lads in Icelandic Yuletide
Pretty
tradition.
much.
Yeah.
They are, which again might beg some looking at, were they named after festivities or people who turned up during certain parts of the year? Who knows? I like to think they might have been, but I don't know. And I quite like not knowing.
So if you guys want to see more of this, then please comment either in the comments here now or on the video when it's up. I really enjoyed this so much.
Me too.
I have two cameras here, one hopefully filming the drawing process in a better camera angle than on stream. On stream you can, I will not dare to. Yeah, I'm
don't
still
touch
figuring out the setup here, so bear with me, people. It will be, one day I'll be a professional. Not going to happen.
I mean, what they don't know is I had to shut my cat out of the room before this broadcast because she was jumping on the screen, and I think you're the professional here. I'm just a cat lady.
I resent being called a professional, so
okay, you're not a professional. You know things.
I've started printing my own t-shirts just for when I am out and drawing concerts and stuff, where it on the back says anti-professional at work. So I like that.
Nice, very nice. We like that.
We are digressing again. What I have to say is, Claire, thank you, Dr. Claire. Thank you so much for
thank you
being here with me. Stay on the line after we end. But are there any places that people should follow you online that they should?
Sure. If you want to follow me, I'm generally on Instagram. So you can find me on @Clarify. So @CLAREIFY, all one word.
So I will link to that in the description. And when can we expect to see, hear, read, experience your whole Völuspá?
Well, I am hoping to bring a performance to Oxford sometime soon, maybe get it filmed. But there are rumblings. I'm working on a book version, which I hope to bring out sometime in the next year or two. Things grind slowly. And I would like to make a film of it, but that's all it's kind of in the mill at the moment. So if you want to stay tuned for that, look at my Instagram. I'll post silly posts about staffs and wood and stones and occasional Norse poetry. And you'll find out there.
And if you want more of Dr. Claire on my streams, then just ask. Maybe we can come back someday and draw some big-thighed giantesses.
What's that Queen song? Fat Bottom Girls?
Yes.
Big-thighed giantesses?
Yeah, fat bottom girls make the rocking world go round. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.